XPW was known for being crazy. It's what it was. It was extreme pro wrestling.
We did death matches. That was a license to kill for me.
I was a porn star living the dream of a wrestler.
If we could degrade people and entertain people, let's f***ing do it.
In 1999, porn filmmaker Rob Black combined his passion for violent death matches and the spirit of his provocative adult films to realize his dream promotion, extreme pro wrestling.
XPW was a labor of love for Rob. He wanted it to work.
In order to become America's top hardcore wrestling outfit, XPW celebrated those who performed increasingly dangerous stunts.
But then you want to come out there and put a gun in somebody's mouth and blow the back of their brains out. I outdid you. But that's what it would take.
Rob Black had no appreciation for wrestling because he had no clue about wrestling.
Rob always thought of himself as like a mafia guy. Can't leave. You know, no one leaves the family.
When the violence in the ring bleeds out into real life, Rob Black's command over a legion of young wrestlers begins to crumble as mounting legal bills force his wrestling and porn empires to implode.
I don't remember the pain of it because I was going into shock.
It got real dark after that.
Dumbasses. Like, what were we thinking? We weren't.
Rob knew just how to push. He said, how far can I go?
We're known for all the taboo stuff that everyone said you can't do, and we do it.
And he just pushed a little too far.
Tongue my sweaty balls. They're big. They're not hairy. They're smooth, shaved, but they're sweaty.
Are you surprised that Rob doesn't want to be a part of this episode?
Honestly, I think it's a no-win situation for him. I really do.
It's probably better that he doesn't say anything, you know?
But he's the type of guy where he wouldn't want to be part of somebody else's production and somebody else's project. If you can't hold court and you're just going to sit in a chair and get asked questions, that's just not Rob.
So, for people who don't know, who is Rob Black?
Okay, I'm ready. I'm Jessica Darlin. I was part of XPW for about 2 years.
Look at that!
And I was also Extreme Associates contract girl for almost 4. Rob Black is someone, you love him or you hate him.
I can do whatever I want! I own this f***ing company, and you don't!
Rob Black is, in wrestling terms, the ultimate heel. He is a wrestling owner, promoter, and he had been in the adult film business his whole life.
Kick your arms back so your tits, because I'm gonna go in with the camera.
He was doing stuff like today would be the norm. Gaping buttholes and pissing and puking and really wild sex. He was doing it when no one else did. And that's who we were. We wanted to be the bad boys.
I do what I want because I'm the owner's wife.
Lizzie was an adult film actress, and she came to Extreme, started dating Rob.
What are you doing?
Cut. You don't say nothing.
You said ask you what you're doing.
No. I'm gonna ask you what you're doing.
Oh, sorry.
She became his girlfriend, and she was done with the business. You know, she didn't perform. Like, she directed and produced, and she was part of porn, but she was on the other side of it.
Kiss me.
In addition to his penchant for subversive pornography, Rob Black is enamored with the underworld of hardcore wrestling and eventually strikes a working relationship with Extreme Championship Wrestling's revolutionary founder, Paul Heyman.
ECW was a big party.
New Jack serenading Angel!
We had fun, we got high, we did drugs, we had a ball. I am New Jack, the original gangster. What Paulie brought to the table was a group of guys that did our thing, and we had a good time doing it.
What I remember about the Rob Black, Paul Heyman relationship was Rob wanted to bring ECW to the West Coast, and there was arrangements to do that. I'm David Marquez. I was the producer and director of the XPW television show.
Welcome to another edition of XPW TV.
But when ECW got their network deal, it was kind of, why do we need Rob? So that all went out the window. Rob was extremely upset about that, and to spite ECW, that's how you get XPW.
Because me and WCW have a common hatred, and that's for that son of a bitch, Paul Heyman, back on the East Coast.
That's what set Rob Black off, where I'm gonna make this better than ECW. No, I'm gonna do this in spite of you. I'm Joey Chaos, the rock superstar of XPW, and the owner of Santino Brothers Wrestling in Los Angeles, California. I wasn't a huge wrestling fan growing up. I was a huge fan of my Uncle Supreme. He is like a godfather of deathmatch wrestling, and that is his legacy. He's the one that loved professional wrestling. I just tagged along because I love my uncle. And I remember my Uncle Supreme telling me, hey, so you know that there's this porno wrestling happening. Porno wrestling? Is it gonna be wrestling or porn? What is it?
I walked in the office, and I believe Rob just looked at me and said, I now own a wrestling company, and you're now going to valet. So it was a crazy dynamic. You would have girls having sex in the office doing scenes. We also had the ring in the back. So guys going around, they'd be wrestling with girls with no clothes on with cum all over them.
It was definitely an eye-opener working in there. My name is Sylvia Munoz. On the wrestling circuit, I'm Jezebel Romo, but at XPW, I was the merch girl or the extreme bitch. It was almost a joy to see people in clothes. That was more of a turn on than seeing all the tits, ass, dicks. And, you know, then you had like one of the porn guys there, and he's sitting there and he's talking to you, and he's like, hey, so how's your wrestling scene? And how's this? And how's that? And I'm just like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm just getting ready for a scene, you know, gotta stay hard. And it was just that casual.
I remember walking in and going to training. This chick was in the pool eating chicken while the guy was peeing on her, and they're filming it. And I'm like, what is this shit? I guess there was people that wanted to see it because it was funding XPW.
I remember leaving my desk, going into the cafeteria, and there being a woman dressed up as the Statue of Liberty and 3 guys with presidential masks on partaking in the filming of a scene on the lunch table. My name is Mike Hartsfield, and I'm a former live event producer for Extreme Pro Wrestling. A lot of us would work our 9-hour day and then stay another 6 or 7 or 8 hours. There were nights I slept in the ring.
In order to get paid for wrestling, I had to edit porn. Not that I was against it, it's just that the subject matter was so offensive at times. Here I am, an Emmy Award-winning news guy, editing fossil.
I think a lot of the extreme girls saw me as like a, I hate to use this analogy, but like as a new puppy or something like that. And it was awesome. It was awesome. My name is William Welch, and in XPW, my gimmick was the Messiah. The first battle royal I ever was part of, Why Trash Johnny Webb gave me the chair shot, and I took it square in the head, didn't put my hands up. I was told that Rob liked the fact that I didn't put my hands up. I mean, it looked like an ECW chair shot. And as he walks by me, he goes, "What's up, Jesus?" Like, I went, what? I was gonna be called the Savior or the Messiah. And between the two, I could care less, because I think they both stink, but it's way better than Jesus.
The Messiah has returned.
At the time, I was working at a steakhouse, and I'd show up to work with gig marks on my head from bleeding, and they would send me home. Like, you can't be around customers looking like that.
It looks like something out of a horror movie.
So I was the big dog in XPW, and he held 2 belts at one time, you know?
So now I got my guardian angel, Messiah, baby! Mr. XPW.
I think it was drinking the Kool-Aid that Rob was serving.
Whether it's brainwashing or whatever the case is, and we were brainwashed.
I mean, there wasn't one guy on that roster who didn't bust their ass for that company.
I mean, some of the things I've seen, I don't know why they would do it, but they did it.
On the long run, it was really, really stupid to do a lot of those dumb things that we did. My name is Luke Hawks. In XPW, I went by Altar Boy Luke. I did a 450 off the balcony through a table with thumbtacks with Supreme on it. The thumbtacks had actually broke off into my hand, and I had to use pliers to pull the thumbtacks out. It was always, okay, now what can you do next? How can you top it?
We wanted to do this fire spot, so we sent a ring crew guy to get some lighter fluid. And it turns out he got charcoal fluid.
Which is oil-based. Regular lighter fluid, it's alcohol-based, so it burns up quick.
And it starts pulling up on this table, and they put the flame, and it goes out. We know what the image should look like, and it's not happening. It's not, so she keeps doing it. And then we get this good flame, and they go for the spot. Since there was so much fluid, his shirt got soaked.
It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
He was running around the ring, screaming, I don't blame him. And I saw Chaos pinning Supreme and lifting up, and part of Supreme's skin is on Chaos, and it was pretty traumatic.
I went straight to the hospital. And I remember going upstairs to go see my Uncle Supreme, all wrapped up. And I remember him saying, damn, that was a good match. That spot it up. Like, that was like his response.
The roster's willingness to sacrifice themselves on a nightly basis, along with tantalizing appearances of crossover porn stars, made XPW an instant hit with local fans. In response, ECW stages their first ever live show in Los Angeles.
Heatwave 2000!
Rob Black always had this, I'm a mafia mentality. So in his mind, ECW is coming into our territory.
Because you're in our backyard. Why? Why, Paul Heyman?
They're coming to like kind of shut us up.
In retaliation, Rob Black orders his ring crew to distribute XPW flyers at the event and has his top talent sit ringside to attempt a disrupting presence.
Rob Black, he can get you to go to war for him. 100%. He had that ability to get you to say, dude, we're gonna die for you. We'll die right here at Heatwave for you, brother. Like, let's do it. Die for the cause.
Sitting there front row, and then the main event comes on.
So I turn to the hard camp, and I throw the X symbol, like, this is it. Security just mobs us, just grab my neck, like with their gorilla paws. And we're getting thrown out of this building. They close the doors, and it's quiet. There's all this ruckus, and it's just quiet. And we're like, where is everybody?
Meanwhile, on the other side of the arena, the XPW ring crew is not so lucky.
And we beat the out of them. I had just had surgery on my leg, so I hit somebody in the face with a crutch. The guy came up, he was like, "New Jack, we don't want no trouble." I was like, "Whop."
You don't go after Supreme, you don't go after Messiah, you don't go after Kick-Ass, you go after a couple of the 140-pound ring crew guys. That's what you do, because your company and you are a piece of shit. And us at XPW are gonna flush you, the piece of shit, right down the toilet.
I straight up told Joey, I straight up told him, this was stupid. And in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking, Rob Black was supposed to be here. Where is he?
In April 2001, financial ruin forces ECW to fold, allowing rival promoter Rob Black to welcome their top talent into XPW's growing empire of extreme.
Everything that Rob Black said, like, happened. You know, to be honest with you, to his credit, like, I'm gonna bring in Sabu, I'm gonna bring in Shane Douglas, and we're like, yeah, right. And then he'd bring this guy in, and we'd be like, Jesus, this is real.
I mean, for f***'s sake, we got Terry Funk. I mean, we were big.
Terry Funk's got that. Hey!
We made it.
Do you remember how he explained his vision for what XPW was going to be?
It was going to be ECW on steroids. That's what he said.
Wait a minute. Oh,
yeah. But I laughed and I said, let's do it. I'm Sabu. But after I left ECW, Rob Black called me up. Then I go out there and I find out it's a half a porn company.
Sabu is here in XPW, ladies and gentlemen. It's Sabu.
You know, and then he got like Candido, Cronus. like New Jack.
What you consider a wrestling ring, I consider a killing field.
A few other guys. So it started to look like a rejected ECW.
Did Paulie or any of your other ECW guys give you shit for doing this XPW stuff?
What they gonna say to me? I ain't gonna about Paulie or no about it, you know what I mean? I ain't gonna about the mother. I was got to making money. I got to eat. And get some porn.
Well, what we have here is our warehouse, which houses all of our dirty, filthy pornography.
He was like, Jack, get whatever you want. I was driving the forklift around, going up to get my porn, and I would ship boxes of them. I swear to God, I had over 1,000 DVDs.
Despite the demise of his main competitor, Rob continues to escalate the violence in XPW to disturbing new extremes.
There was a show where I was wrestling Supreme and Angel.
Down goes Supreme!
And I put my hand up and the chair smacks me, and it looks brutal, like he kills me with the chair. As soon as we get to the back dressing room, Rob Black's in the back, and he's going, "This is f***ing XPW! We don't put our f***ing hands up! We don't do it!" And like he's like yelling at me, and I'm going, wait, did I do something wrong? Because I was always taught, you know, to put my hand up for a chair shot, don't stick your neck out. So Jerry Lynn pulls me aside, he goes, "Don't listen to a thing he says. He has no clue what he's talking about. You did it right, you protected yourself, it looked great." What I didn't know was behind the scenes that Rob, the next show, was gonna have me handcuffed and crucified, basically, chained up like this with my arms out. And he told Supreme that as payback, he had to hit me several times across the head, unprotected with a chair. And I had no idea it was coming.
Oh my goodness, did you hear the impact? Luke's got nowhere to go, nowhere to go. Simply at the mercy.
And next thing you know, one shot turns to two, two shots turn to three.
Oh my goodness!
Probably cracking my skull. I didn't go to the doctor because I didn't have health insurance, but I have a really big indentation from those chair shots in my skull.
Telling him to back up. Supreme will have none of it.
So I remember they were like, you're very bad concussed, you can't go to sleep, and you gotta sit up, and sitting in a hotel room after, just miserable. My head's pounding, I'm throwing up, I kinda have no idea where I'm at. I'm wondering if I'm gonna die. And this is all because of some goddamn idiot who knows nothing about wrestling thinks I needed to pay for putting my hand up on a chair shot.
With mounting injuries and a waning interest in performing for bloodthirsty crowds, the Messiah is forced to reconsider his future in the company.
I just went to Rob, I had the belts with me, and I went, dude, I'm done. Like, I'm done, my body's beat up. He just looked at me, and he went, okay, if you're done, I'm done. I'm like, wait, what? He goes, if you don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to do this anymore. It's that simple. I'm finished. And I know he would never have stopped doing XPW because I left. I know that never would have happened. Honestly, I got played. And that's what happened. I remember talking to Lizzie about it, and Lizzie essentially said, that's what he does. Lizzie said he's done that to me, too. Even when it came to like Lizzie Borden and I, Lizzie said, Rob wants me to flirt with guys. I was like, why? I don't know, he just likes it. You know, I think Rob liked having the hot girlfriend, and
I think you look really cute. Keep your top on, though.
I'm trying, hun.
you can't have her, but you know, it's she's flirting with you, but it doesn't mean she wants you.
It's good.
And Rob, you know, Rob was getting like, you know, BJ's like every other day. You know, he'd tell the girl that was doing it that he's filming it for another title, Cocksmokers. That was the other one.
I know she would get jealous of some of the girls that, you know, were rumored to have been with Rob.
Whenever they had an argument, she would just show up at my house. And I think I got caught in the crosshairs of something that was going on between Lizzie and Rob. And I was used as like a chess piece.
How beautiful you are.
Rob, I have to go fluff my hair. Don't. Please don't.
Let's see your boobies.
You want, what, you want me to do a porno?
Spooky.
I'm gonna do a movie.
Maybe not.
I wanna do a movie.
Oh, really? So,
Who can I do it with?
no one. swear, why would you?
I think when it came to me, things got taken too far. They just got taken too far.
That was the story I remember hearing, that the Messiah and Lizzie Borden had something going on.
And then I remember Supreme, we would always just say, no way, he wouldn't mess this up like this. We all love this wrestling thing. We're all trying to make a go at it.
So what happened?
Unfortunately, Lizzie and I ended up hooking up. You know, and I knew it was bad news as soon as it happened.
I figured Rob didn't care who this girl, you know. But he said, as long as it's on film, he don't care. If it's behind his back, he cares. And I don't blame him. So he wanted to kill him.
When wrestler The Messiah fails to show for an XPW event, rumors of his affair with Lizzie Borden begin to circulate.
There was a house show we were going to do in our warehouse. And from what I understand, Sabu showed up and The Messiah didn't.
I didn't tell Supreme or Chaos or any of those guys what was going on. Those would have been the guys I would have told.
So how did it come out?
It just come out. Rob found out.
And they go, well, it comes out like, hey, yeah, he was the boss's wife. And our jaw dropped, like, really? Why would he mess up this XPW thing, man? Like, why would he do that? Like, he fucked up.
I slept with Billy, too. They got around all of them.
Rob Black and Lizzie Borden's relationship survives the affair, but the Messiah is promptly exiled from XPW.
And so the Messiah was written out of the company through a bizarre storyline that happened with an apparition out in the warehouse.
Messiah, you can't go. I need you tonight. Everything is on the line. What are you thinking? What are you thinking?
The Messiah has come and gone.
He went to heaven. That was what they explained to him to go away. Another lame hit, you know, for the company.
This ain't funny. You got it. I don't know what the I'm doing, man.
I had a conversation with Rob where he basically just threatened me on the phone and essentially like, give me a countdown. 3 days. You got 3 days to live. You know, this is what I'm gonna do for you, Billy. I'm gonna buy you a plane ticket to Michigan and you get out of California. I'm not running. That's the exact words I told him. I'm not running.
With the loss of one of XPW's biggest attractions, Rob Black looks to stage his most ambitious spectacle yet, with a high-stakes match between New Jack and Vic Grimes. Unbeknownst to Grimes, New Jack aims to retaliate against him for a fractured skull he suffered in a previous match 2 years earlier.
See here, I can get away with murder. Murder. I mean real murder, and that's what I'm getting ready to do.
Whose idea was it to do that scaffold match?
Rob Black. He told me, he said, Jack, we're gonna do a scaffold match. The loser gets thrown off. I'm gonna flip a coin. I said, Rob, you can flip a coin all day long. Vic is getting thrown off the scaffold. I said, I'm not taking that bump. Vic is.
All right. Listen to me. Changing the stipulations a little bit, all right? We need to spice this shit up.
The free fall event was a colossal undertaking, to say the least. Everyone was under the assumption this scaffolding was going to be used for cameramen, including the building. If I had gone about the insurance the normal way a lot of companies do, it probably would have been pretty difficult. So to bypass a lot of that, I would just make up the insurance waivers on my computer. I remember finding an old insurance certificate that they had used prior, and I scanned it and I whited out some certain things, and then I just typed up who needed coverage. I faxed them the certificate that I made, and I got a call saying, just got the insurance, we're good to go on the show.
So wait a minute, there wasn't actually insurance for the event?
Yeah.
Look at this, Grimes! Grimes is starting! And yes, they're both going up!
You know, and that damn thing looked rickety. It's not meant to have two big guys up there bumping and fighting. I remember seeing the thing and it's kind of shifting back and forth, and I'm just like, holy shit.
And the crowd would, oh, and I could see the scaffolding swaying.
What the hell is gonna happen?
And just watching everything going on, just crossing my fingers.
Please, God, please have mercy on their souls.
And I hear the crowd gasping, and I look up and New Jack's got a stun gun.
Oh, Jesus! Oh, look at this!
I could not believe it. And I was just like, it's gonna be over soon. It's gonna be over soon.
No, please, no!
I'll never forget just like the look on Vic's face when he was just coming down, and it just looked like pure terror.
It was really an intense moment. But as he turned over, his legs hit the ring ropes and flipped him back into the ring. If it had hit his butt, he would have slid out onto the concrete.
His bitch ass would have hit the goddamn floor and splattered like a egg.
That was a little dangerous and a little like there is a God, and he just saved his ass.
Vic Grimes is gonna need medical attention, please. Let's clear the building.
What was the reaction from Rob Black?
Oh, he was like, Jack, that was great. I loved it. That was great. Thank you. Here's the bonus. So he paid me. So I did my last show, which was with Vic Grimes. Once I got him, I felt like mission accomplished. I was done. So I left.
With New Jack's departure, Rob Black loses another big star. To make matters worse, the Messiah publicly admits to his affair with Lizzie Borden, boasting about it at a show in Southern California.
I was told by people at the Extreme Associates office that Rob was keeping tabs on me, that he knew and was aware of everything I was doing. I then started getting very resentful. And I know in Rob's mind, you weren't supposed to hear about me ever again. In my mind, I'm stuffing it down Rob's throat. And I was happy to do it. The whole entire place started chanting, "You effed Lizzie." Me being in my 23-year-old frame of mind, I yelled, wasn't the most smartest thing I've ever done. Because up to that point, I'd always just denied it.
But I remember saying, like, man, Billy, like, hey, just let it go, bro. Like, let it go. Like he fired you, you the boss's wife, like, you guys are even, just let it go.
If you're gonna tell me I can't do something, you're gonna threaten me, I'm gonna prove to you that I can do it. I'm gonna show you that I'm not scared of you.
With the Messiah's outspoken bravado and XPW's diminishing attendance, Rob Black's frustration intensifies.
XPW had put on a show. I purposely sit up in the nosebleed section. The match wasn't very good. The crowd started throwing like around a beach ball and chanting "beach ball." You know, the beach ball would get snatched, and you know, the crowd would go, "Oh!" The crowd was not being receptive. I guess Rob found out I was there. And I was told he threw a temper tantrum backstage. My phone rings, it's Dynamite D. Hey, you need to leave. Wait, why do I need to leave? Rob is pissed off and he's yelling at all of us because you're here. Hung up the phone and we left. I mean, we left, that was it. I just got home from work. I just bought a Nintendo GameCube, so I was gonna play some video games. The front door opens, and these two guys walk in. I immediately assumed they were with my roommate, so I didn't think anything of it. I even said, "Hey, what's up?" I can see the reflection off the TV of the two guys. I see the one guy lock the door, and then I see both of them going, "You get him. No, you get him." And I turn like this to then confront them, and then boom, they just jumped on me. One of them got me in a chokehold, but I knew he didn't have it in right. I get choked out all the time, and I knew what a chokehold felt like. One of them got my hand down, and the other one had clippers. And got it around my thumb, and then snapped it, and thumb popped right off. Then they went to my other hand, and I kept it in a fist. So they couldn't get it, and they started pounding on my hand to open up my fist. And I wouldn't do it. We had a little fish tank and busted it over my head. They were trying, I think, to knock me out. I was able to get to the door without having my thumb. It was like I was waving at the lock. So they got me, pulled me back in. They just got on top of me and started, punching me in the face or punching me anywhere. By this point, both of them are gassed out and tired. One of them threw a punch at me. I got him in an arm bar and just wrenched on him, and he screamed. When he screamed, I let go, made it to the door, was able to unlock the door at that point, and the door just flew open, and they both ran out. Got a cup of ice, and then began to try to search for my thumb, but it was hard to find anything, and I couldn't locate it, and then I think I just passed out.
While the Messiah was fighting off home invaders, his XPW colleagues were unaware his life was in serious danger.
On this particular night, GQ Money and I were gonna film a segment for XPW TV, and then all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. Go open the door, it's Rob Black. What is Rob Black doing here? Rob Black has never been here. Why is he here? And he was not the Rob Black that we knew. He kind of just sat on the couch. So I was like, why are you here? Why are you here? I had no clue. I woke up the next morning. Billy said 2 black guys came into his house, and there was a fight.
To this day, I don't know if they were after to kill him, what they were after to do. But a lot of us were just in shock and awe. And, it's like, and then the rumors started flying, the speculation.
I remember how I first saw it. It was on America's Most Wanted. And I remember I was sitting with my husband and I go, holy shit, that's Messiah. Oh my God, they cut off his thumb. What's going on? What's going on?
But who would want the Messiah hurt for real? To answer that, cops have been delving into the secretive and sometimes sleazy subculture of indie wrestling.
And I remember looking at my husband and going, we all know who did this. We all know who's behind it, but we can't do nothing. And I can't prove it.
What's going on? What's happening? Is that true? Rob Black has something to do with it? No, come on.
And I actually asked Rob about it one day.
Message Sunday, 1:09 a.m.
Hey, DJ, I heard what happened to Messiah, right? And don't pretend like y'all, don't know what's going on.
I was like, did you do that? And he was like, oh no, Jack, I had nothing to do with that.
There's speculation. I don't know who did it. I know that Billy said it was 2 black guys, that physically did it. After this had happened, I remember Rob Black saying, watch out who you hang out with. You might get your arm chopped off. What did that mean? Be careful who you hanging out with. You know what I mean? Because he was pissed that we were still friends with Messiah. Oh yeah, 100%. He was pissed that we weren't like that guy. You know what I mean?
I actually ended up leaving, I would say, within a couple weeks to a month after that. It wasn't fun when people were going, 1 thumb up, or trying to shake your hand and going like that instead of the normal, and and laughing about it. There's no proof, and this is just one girl talking. We all think Rob had something to do with it.
The biggest thing I could do, in my opinion, was to go back doing what I loved, which was wrestling. And that's what I did.
And everybody in this arena, get a good look, because this is no work. I have no thumb, and I don't give a shit, because I can still open beer, still play video games, and still run a telegram to anybody I want to.
With no evidence linking Rob Black to the assault on the Messiah, he is never charged. However, he and Lizzie begin to draw the attention of federal authorities for posturing in the media about pushing legal boundaries with their latest adult films.
A girl being kidnapped, being forced to have sex, being butchered at the end, and spit on. She's being degraded.
We're known for all the taboo stuff that everyone said you can't do, and we do it, and we sell it, and people are entertained because people are bored with the other stuff.
They were doing such extreme stuff, and I wasn't into it, and it wasn't where I wanted to go. And so I finally just said, you know, hey, Rob, this is where it ends.
I watch Nightline all the time.
This is Nightline.
And just on random day, Rob's a guest of Ted Koppel. He was trying to justify the lewd acts that were in these videos against freedom of speech. And John Ashcroft, the Attorney General of the United States at that point, was coming after him.
We're not drug dealers or murderers, you know, we make movies.
Rob always wanted to be like Hugh Hefner or Larry Flint.
We make movies, just like Hollywood makes movies, just like
Oh no, they're not just like Hollywood makes movies. In your movies, women are brutally raped, they're actually beat up.
I'm fighting for your First Amendment rights. And he wasn't, he was fighting for himself.
Zakari, quote, issued a challenge to Attorney General Ashcroft and said that Ashcroft, quote, could not do anything about his films.
And I'm at home, I'm like, you're challenging John Ashcroft? You're challenging the United States government? Like, why would you do that? Why would anyone do that?
There was a time when there was a meeting in Rob's office. Rob stood up from his desk and said, hey, when we get raided by the feds, everyone report to Kevin. That's who's gonna get information. That's who you need to speak to. When we get raided by the feds, it wasn't if, it was when.
I remember the morning of the postal raid at Extreme Associates. We figured out what was going on because everyone was wearing United States Postal Service, kind of like the CIA or FBI jackets you see in movies and television. And we put two and two together and figured out that the government somehow, some way, figured out how to get Rob. How can you go on network television and challenge the government? Like, who does that? And he did. And he got popped for it.
They had to go after me first because I had the biggest mouth. You can't start a war on pornography unless you go after the person that is defying you the most. Right here is the Federal 5. These are the 5 tapes that could put me in jail forever.
I was really interested on where it was going to go because I thought that's a brilliant question. Like, who in government is going to decide what's decent or indecent between two paid actors?
But I mean, it was like, Rob knew what he was doing, and he knew that legally you cannot have someone sit there and say, my 13-year-old ass. You can't do it. But he didn't care.
The funny thing about my business is I don't force it on anybody. The only people that are going to be forced to watch my movies are the 12 people that sit in that jury.
Facing multiple charges for violating federal obscenity statutes, Rob Black and Lizzie Borden face 50 years in prison and millions in fines. The legal battle quickly consumes all of Rob Black's resources, spelling the end of XPW.
There were times when there would just be a month of talent check bouncing, and there would be 20 people in the lobby pissed off. And literally everyone with a check in their hand.
XPW will be starting in just a few minutes, so please grab your seats and get ready to get extreme!
It killed the whole business because all the lawyer fees, and you can't produce movies, you can't pay wrestlers, you can't pay actors, you can't pay actresses.
I think he ultimately thought that the adult industry would, come to his support. And they saw through his BS. He should have known it then, but he definitely knows it now. Dude, the government, they got more money, they got more lawyers, and they got more time.
These charges were getting dropped and dropped and dropped, and one finally stuck.
Unable to mount a costly defense, Rob and Lizzie opt to plead guilty to a single charge of conspiracy to distribute obscene materials.
I believe he got a year and a day, if I'm not mistaken.
I remember when I heard that Rob and Lizzie were thrown in jail, I kind of feel bad for Lizzie because it's like, you know, she wasn't the most innocent, sweet thing in the world either, but I think she went down just because her name was on the title.
I thought he got what he deserved, not because of what happened to me, but to go on TV and ask the government, yeah, come at me, do it. Just the ego, the absolute ego.
After serving his time, Rob Black leaves the world of wrestling behind, and his relationship with Lizzie would also come to an end.
You know, I've asked myself over the years, it's been almost 20 years, and I've asked myself, if I could do it again, would I? Yeah.
Yes. Every part of it, even the bad times I would. Yes. Of course I'd go back.
Because we had something incredibly special there. I mean, it wasn't just the wrestlers, and it wasn't just Rob Black. It was a combination of everything that made the magic. Everybody wanted the show to succeed.
Now I'm in Hollywood. Now I'm living my dream, and I have the greatest job in the world, and that might not have happened if I wasn't in XPW.
That time is incredibly important to me. All of the situations that, you know, involved in the friendships that are still happening to this day.
Me and Sylvia, we actually got married at a pro wrestling show.
We're actually celebrating our 9-year anniversary next week.
We are like peanut butter and jelly. We just love wrestling, and that's all we do. So my uncle, Supreme, just the people just really loved him. You know, unfortunately, he passed away last May 6th. There's just a lot of love, like when he passed away, just a lot of love, like that people just messaging and just talking about him, and just, I know it really touched me, but I just so wish, I just so wish that people would have let him know when he was alive, because he loved that shit. Like, who doesn't? But man, without Supreme, I'd have never been a wrestler whatsoever. I don't know what I'd be doing. I'd be driving a truck, I guess. I don't know.
Embracing now with his Uncle Supreme.
I would not change one thing from the simple fact of all of that led me to my wife, and now I have my 2 daughters. So it was all worth it in my eyes. Because at the end of the day, Messiah means nothing. Once I walk through that door at home, I'm just dad and husband. And that's the most important thing to me.
What we're doing right now will put XPW back on the map for a few months. But it ain't nothing that they did that be like, oh, that'll go down in history. Besides me throwing big grounds over the scaffold.
As far as I know, Rob is happily married. He has a couple kids, and I think he's running a hamburger shop back east somewhere. I'm not quite sure where. But I always wonder, would he want, if he could come back, would he? And I don't know. I have no idea who the Rob Black is now, or who Robert Zakari is nowadays. Because I wonder, is he still Rob Black?
And action.
Honey, why are you so worked up? Everything's gonna be okay.
They turned their backs on me. I'm playing with dolls. I'm done with all that. It's gonna be a new me. People are gonna regret what they did to me.
What are you talking about?
You'll see. You'll see. I gotta get something to drink. I'm dying over here.
Turn their backs on him.
Cut.
Quit match. Ignoring all warnings, Foley orchestrated a brutal sequence where he was handcuffed and repeatedly struck in the head with a steel chair. The original plan called for 5 strikes. In the heat of the moment, The Rock delivered 11 unprotected chair shots to Foley's skull. Foley's family sat in the front row, completely traumatized by the very real brutality unfolding before them. Foley's daughter, Noelle, later expressed deep disgust over the incident, recognizing how close her father came to losing his life or his mind for the sake of a storyline. The collateral damage of these decisions is the untold story of this industry. Foley faced intense scrutiny from medical professionals who warned him that continued in-ring competition would leave him permanently crippled. The repetitive trauma, the concussions layered upon concussions, brought the terrifying reality of chronic traumatic encephalopathy to the forefront of his life. Today, Foley openly admits to struggling with the long-term effects of his career, constantly battling memory issues, and fearing what his neurological health will look like in 10 or 20 years. He utilizes spoken word tours as mental gymnastics, fighting to keep his mind sharp while still satisfying his deep-seated need for a crowd's reaction. Looking back, we are forced to ask the ultimate question: was it worth it? For years, Foley harbored deep resentment toward the Hell in a cell match, feeling it overshadowed everything else he had accomplished as a multifaceted performer. It took time and a poignant conversation with The Undertaker to help him find peace with his legacy. The Undertaker reminded him that what they created that night in Pittsburgh would outlive them both. According to those closest to him, Foley recently visited the company's archival warehouse and unexpectedly came face-to-face with the original cell structure. Reaching out and touching the steel, the hardcore legend broke down in tears. It was a profound moment of reflection, a realization of the terrifying risks he took and the immense luck that allowed him to walk away with his life. The story of Mick Foley and Hell in a Cell match remains a beautifully dangerous masterpiece, an epic success, and a sobering cautionary tale. It is a stark reminder of the incredible, sometimes terrifying lengths human beings will go to in order to find acceptance, leaving an indelible mark on history, while forever carrying the physical and mental scars of their journey. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another deep and unflinching look into the shadows of the squared circle. Over my many years sitting at ringside, analyzing the physical chess matches of the World Wrestling Federation, World Championship Wrestling, Extreme Championship Wrestling, Total Nonstop Action, and All Elite Wrestling, I have witnessed the absolute zenith of athletic triumph, and I have seen the terrifying depths of human sacrifice. But today, we are going to pull back the curtain on a specific night. A night that fundamentally altered the psychological and physical landscape of professional wrestling forever. We are looking at a masterclass in pain, an exhibition of unparalleled madness that sits firmly in the darkest chapters of sports entertainment history. According to the historical archives of the industry, on June 28, 1998, at the World Wrestling Federation King of the Ring pay-per-view event, the world witnessed a spectacle that defied every logical instinct of self-preservation. The match was The Undertaker versus Mankind. The structure was Hell in a Cell. Whenever you hear the phrase Hell in a Cell, it hits you like a heavy iron mallet to the consciousness. As an analyst who has studied the blueprints of these matches, I knew the specific encounter was going to be intense. The structure itself is an unforgiving cage of cold steel. But nobody, not even the most seasoned backstage veterans, knew it was going to push the boundaries of mortality until it fell completely over the edge. In that ring, you had two generational talents who loved to test the limits of what a human body could endure. People often say that professional wrestling is a scripted performance, but you cannot script gravity. I have been frightened by a multitude of things in this volatile industry, but according to the seasoned professionals who were present that night, nothing frightened the locker room as much as the unrelenting punishment Mick Foley endured. Until you watched it unfold with your own two eyes, you simply could not believe that a living, breathing human being could physically absorb this level of devastation and live to talk about it. Make no mistake about it, this match was real. The trauma was real. The agonizing drama was real. Behind the curtain, executives and peers were cursing, screaming, and questioning the sanity of the man willingly throwing his life away. Why do this? Why surrender your body to such immense collateral damage? This infamous matchup persists today as both a monumental epic and a chilling cautionary tale. The general consensus among those who produced the broadcast is that the company dodged several fatal bullets that day. When we look back at the footage, it is genuinely terrifying to think that officials allowed a competitor to lose consciousness and then simply continue a live performance. When is enough finally enough? You pay for the rest of your life for the decisions you make during your 15 minutes in the spotlight. It was a dangerously crazy masterpiece, but as journalists, as fans, and as human beings, we must ask a profound question. Was the sacrifice worth it? To understand the madness of June 28th, 1998, we have to analyze the deeply complex psychology of the man behind the mask. According to Mick Foley himself, everyone who steps inside a wrestling ring is desperately searching for something missing in their own personal lives. Growing up, Foley was teased relentlessly. This developed into an overwhelming, almost consuming need to be liked and accepted. The records show a fascinating anecdote from his time as a college sophomore that perfectly encapsulates his psychological drive. Foley reportedly took a swig of red food coloring, climbed onto a bed, and executed a massive diving leap onto a stuffed object resting on a solid concrete floor. Upon hitting the unforgiving ground, he spat the blood-like concoction out for everyone in the dormitory to see. When a female student yelled out that it was the most disgusting thing she had ever seen, Foley did not feel shame. He felt an undeniable surge of power. A psychological revelation occurred in that dorm room. If he could not make the audience love him through conventional charm, he would force them to feel something by disgusting them. He needed reactions. He needed to be noticed. This young man would eventually become the hardcore legend known around the world, the man who survived hell in a cell. However, as many historians are quick to point out, hell in a cell creates a very distorted gateway for new viewers. When new fans witness that level of brutality, they often assume that is a standard for the entire industry. It is absolutely not. A traditional Mick Foley performance, whether he was performing as Cactus Jack or Mankind, was inherently brutal. According to the archives of his international career, he subjected his body to thumbtacks, fire, barbed wire, and even explosive materials during death matches in Japan. He was speared through flaming tables. He took catastrophic falls directly onto exposed concrete. The physical toll was beyond calculation. Through the perspectives of his family, particularly his daughter Noelle Foley and his wife Colette Foley, we begin to see the human being behind the monster. Colette, who has known him for over 35 years, fell in love with his gentle nature and his terrible sense of humor, noting that their wedding song was Beauty and the Beast. Yet, she intimately understood his unyielding commitment to his craft. Realism was his primary weapon. Foley firmly believed that he did not deliver a good performance unless he struggled to physically walk back to his hotel room. He did not necessarily enjoy the agonizing pain, but he thrived on the artistic challenge of absorbing that pain and projecting it to an audience in a way that captivated them. When the adrenaline pumped through his veins, his only drive was to ensure the fans went home talking about the spectacle, entirely at his own personal risk. His early career was defined by the chaotic persona of Cactus Jack. He possessed a raw, magnetic charisma. According to legendary manager and World Wrestling Federation producer Jim Cornette, Foley was an absolute master of in-ring psychology. He understood that the audience craved unpredictability. By appearing completely out of control and going against the traditional unwritten rules of the script, Foley forced the audience to join him on a terrifying ride. Much of the psychology was forged in his early days. The Foley family bedroom furniture consisted of a simple mattress on the floor, accompanied by a black and white television set and a broken videocassette recorder. On that machine, Foley would meticulously study Japanese wrestling tapes, sometimes for 12 hours a day. He was captivated by the realism and the gritty storytelling where a competitor did not just fight an opponent, but had to survive their brutal environment. Japan seemed like his ultimate destiny. In Japan, promoters were looking for a tough foreign competitor to challenge the legendary Terry Funk. Funk, renowned for his ability to make audiences suspend their disbelief instantly, became a pivotal mentor to Foley. Together, they revolutionized a violent, bloody deathmatch style. Foley would literally crawl on his hands and knees through debris, viewing his suffering as undeniable proof that he was creating something special. He wanted to stand out, and because of his unorthodox style and physique, he never truly envisioned himself as a mainstream star in the United States. During that era, the World Wrestling Federation was transitioning through a very corporate, general audience-rated phase. It was a sterile environment, and Foley's violent art form did not align with their polished marketing strategy. According to his close friend and traveling partner Al Snow, along with former Vice President of Talent Relations Jim Ross, the chairman of the company, Mr. Vince McMahon, had absolutely no interest in hiring Mick Foley. McMahon did not find Foley marketable or physically attractive for television. It was only through the relentless lobbying of Jim Ross, who pleaded with McMahon to trust his eye for talent, that the door cracked open. The document suggests that McMahon finally relented, slamming his hand on a desk and agreeing to hire Foley under one strict condition: they would cover his face with a leather mask. McMahon wanted to erase Foley's identity completely, as Hall of Fame producer Jerry Briscoe recalled. The creative team was tasked with building a character out of thin air. Thus, Mankind was born. A deranged, tortured soul who dwelled in boiler rooms and pulled his own hair out. Any other performer would have failed miserably with such a bizarre concept, but Foley breathed life into the darkness. He connected with the audience because the fans could intuitively sense his absolute, uncompromised commitment to the role. The strategic goal for the Mankind character was to provide a fresh, dynamic opponent for the company's cornerstone attraction, The Undertaker. McMahon had previously relied on slow, towering giants to face The Undertaker, resulting in lethargic and uninspiring television. What the franchise truly needed was a fearless lunatic. Foley was exactly that. He was willing to try absolutely anything to succeed. But this relentless dedication created a massive challenge for producers. They had to figure out how to stop Foley from accidentally killing himself on live television. The Undertaker and Mankind spent months laying a historic foundation, battling across the globe through 7 major pay-per-view events and 10 television broadcasts. However, by 1998, Foley felt his character had hit a creative plateau. He felt a desperate need to elevate his legacy rather than let it fade. The creative team decided to reignite the bitter rivalry at the King of the Ring event using a relatively new and terrifying concept: Hell in a Cell. Traditional cage matches require a competitor to escape over the top or through a door. The Hell in a Cell was different. It featured a heavy metal roof. 2 men enter and only one leaves. The first iteration of this match, featuring Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, was a certified masterpiece. Foley studied that first match in absolute awe, realizing he possessed none of the athletic agility that Michaels and The Undertaker displayed. Facing the daunting task of following a classic, Foley turned to his mentor, Terry Funk, for advice, according to backstage accounts. Funk jokingly suggested that they should start the match on the roof of the cage, and then Foley should be thrown off. It was a dark piece of humor. But Foley stopped, looked at Funk, and firmly stated that he believed he could do it. The idea became an obsession. Foley casually pitched the terrifying concept to both The Undertaker and Mr. McMahon. Undertaker was highly reluctant to throw a 300-pound man off a towering steel structure. But Foley was an incredible salesman for his own destruction. Eventually, he managed to convince everyone involved. Foley did not view this stunt as the beginning of a new chapter in his career. According to his own admissions, he viewed it as a desperate measure to keep his head above water, fully believing that once the specific run ended, his career would be over. The Undertaker trusted Foley's vision, operating on the unwritten rule of the locker room. If a man says he can safely take a fall, you trust him. On that fateful evening of June 28, 1998, inside a packed Pittsburgh Civic Arena, 16,000 rabid fans anticipated a war. The pressure on Foley must have been suffocating, as former referee Jimmy Corderas and producer Jerry Briscoe monitored the broadcast backstage, watching multiple screens like pilots navigating a storm. Nobody could have possibly anticipated the sheer trauma that was about to unfold. Veteran broadcasters Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler were kept completely in the dark, just like the paying audience. Foley wanted to start the contest in a way no one had ever witnessed. As Foley's entrance music played, he bypassed the cage door and began to climb the outer wall of the massive structure. The audience was paralyzed with shock. Behind the scenes, Foley was battling immense personal fear, as he is notoriously terrified of heights. As The Undertaker made his chilling entrance and began his own climb, Foley desperately wondered how he could gracefully climb back down without ruining his professional reputation. But the match officially began on the roof. Almost immediately, a massive structural problem emerged. The roof of the cage was secured with simple plastic zip ties. When you place over 600 pounds of moving human weight on top of that mesh, physics takes over. With every step the competitors took, the metal mesh sagged drastically, dropping by over a foot. You could audibly hear the plastic ties snapping under the immense pressure. They were inadvertently destroying the Hell in a Cell just by walking on it. Realizing the roof might give way completely, Foley attempted to execute a wrestling maneuver on the steel, but The Undertaker quickly stopped him, understanding that a miscalculation could send them both plunging to the tearing metal. The brawl gravitated toward the edge of the towering structure, directly above the broadcast position. Inside the arena, industry veterans assumed this was merely a visual tease. The margin for error was impossibly small. Looking down from 20 feet in the air, the broadcasting desk looked like a tiny piece of dollhouse furniture. Then, the unthinkable happened. The Undertaker grabbed Mankind, hoisted him into the arena air, and violently flung him off the edge of the steel roof. For those watching, the 300-pound body seemed to fall in slow motion, yet it was over in the blink of an eye. Foley plummeted almost 20 feet, crashing violently through the Spanish broadcast table. Spanish commentator Hugo Savanovic had to dive out of his chair to avoid being crushed. The sound of the impact echoed to the Pittsburgh arena like a horrifying car crash. Backstage, the locker room erupted in sheer panic. The collective thought among the professionals was that they had just witnessed a fatal accident. Foley stopped dead in his tracks amidst the shattered wood and twisted metal. It was a moment of unprecedented danger that blew the collective minds of the wrestling world. There was a sickening, audible gasp from the 16,000 fans. At home, Foley's family watched in terror, with his wife desperately trying to soothe their young children by claiming it was just special effects, even as she secretly panicked. The physical believability of the fall was undeniable. If The Undertaker had thrown him just a fraction of an inch too far or too short, Foley would have hit the solid concrete floor, or worse, landed directly on the innocent spectators in the front row. But Foley had visualized the trajectory. In mid-air, he twisted his massive frame to land as flat as possible on the wooden desk, desperately trying to cushion the catastrophic impact. As Foley lay motionless in the wreckage, the unwritten rules of professional wrestling were shattered. The barrier between reality and performance dissolved. Terry Funk was the first out of the backstage area, rushing to check if his friend was even conscious. Dr. Francois Petit, the resident medical professional for the company, scrambled to the scene. Dr. Petit was a highly respected martial artist and medical expert who frequently treated the battered roster. But this was beyond a standard sports injury. Foley had landed violently on his back, exacerbating a previously dislocated shoulder. Emergency medical technicians arrived with a stretcher, but the chaotic environment proved difficult to navigate. The cage literally had to be mechanically raised with The Undertaker still standing on the roof just to make room. Foley was strapped to the board. The general consensus among the fans, the broadcasters, and the locker room was that the match was unequivocally over. But the human mind is a complex machine, especially when fueled by pure adrenaline and the deafening roar of a crowd. As Foley was being wheeled up the entrance aisle, he made a decision that borders on insanity. He forced himself off the stretcher. He pushed past the medical personnel, and he began to walk back toward the towering steel structure. Backstage officials and peers screamed at the television monitors, pleading for him to stop. They questioned his sanity. How could a human body function after that trauma? Yet, despite the logical screaming of his own peers, This exact moment cemented Foley as an eternal superstar. He was returning for more punishment. The script called for a second major stunt, which had been planned to be much safer than the first. The Undertaker was supposed to execute a choke slam on the roof of the cage, and the mesh was supposed to gradually break, allowing Foley to dangle and eventually be safely pushed down to the ring canvas below. That is not what happened. When The Undertaker delivered the choke slam, the weakened plastic ties gave way instantly and violently. The steel mesh tore open. Foley plummeted freely through the roof, plummeting toward the solid ring below. This was not planned. This was not controlled. This was a catastrophic failure of equipment, resulting in a horrific, unmitigated fall. The ring mat is not a soft cushion. Underneath a thin layer of padding lies hardwood and steel. The impact is comparable to hitting solid cement, but the fall itself was not the only disaster. As Foley plummeted to the broken roof, a heavy, solid steel folding chair fell right behind him. When Foley violently struck the mat, the steel chair landed directly on his face, crushing his mouth. Backstage, the panic turned into profound, chilling silence. People believed they were watching a man die on live television. Foley's wife was furious, believing her husband had lied to her about the dangers of the matchup. The truth was, Foley was a victim of a terrible accident. This was the first time in his extensive, brutal career that he was legitimately knocked completely unconscious. Personnel flooded the ringside area. Dr. Petit and Terry Funk rushed into the cage. Foley was completely unresponsive. The Undertaker, looking down to the hole in the roof, visibly broke character, stepping carefully around the torn steel. According to accounts, the Undertaker told Funk to check if Foley was still breathing. Funk checked, and miraculously, Foley was alive. Foley was lost in darkness for 42 agonizing seconds. To prevent the referee from calling for bell and ending the broadcast, Terry Funk began a chaotic, unscripted brawl with The Undertaker. Bai and the medical team desperately needed time to assess the damage. In any modern sporting environment, the contest would have been immediately terminated. But in the late 90s, the industry operated under a different, far more reckless code. When Foley finally regained consciousness, the first thing his blurred vision focused on was the shoes of Terry Funk. Slowly, the realization washed over him. He was still in the middle of a live pay-per-view event. Driven by sheer instinct, he forced himself to his feet. Nobody, not even medical professionals, could comprehend how his legs supported his weight. Foley's face was a horrifying mask of trauma. As the fog in his brain began to slightly clear, the veteran performer inside him took over. He realized he had a massive, gaping wound completely through his bottom lip, in an act of grotesque theatricality. Foley purposely stuck his own tongue to the hole in his lip, smiling a terrifying, bloody smile for the television cameras. It was then that viewers noticed something even more disturbing. One of his teeth had been completely knocked out by the falling steel chair. The impact had been so violent that the tooth traveled up his throat, and because he was gasping desperately for air, it had been forced upwards and lodged visibly inside his nostril. The concern etched on the faces of every official in the ring was deeply real. You could look into Foley's heavily concussed eyes and see that nobody was home. Yet, operating on pure muscle memory and adrenaline, Foley demanded the match continue. He called for the final planned sequence of the bout. He requested a bag of metal thumbtacks. Thousands of sharp metal tacks were scattered across the hard canvas. Despite a dislocated shoulder, a dislocated jaw, and severe internal bleeding, Foley engaged in the final sequence, purposely taking a heavy fall directly into the sea of metal pins. He rolled across them, ensuring they embedded deeply into his flesh, pushing his body so far past the threshold of pain that he became completely numb to it. He was determined, come hell or high water, to finish the story he had started. Finally, after 17 agonizing minutes, the referee counted to 3. The Undertaker was declared the victor. 16,000 people in Pittsburgh stood in stunned silence and overwhelming awe. Medical personnel brought the stretcher back to the ring, No, it was an absolute necessity. But Foley, in a final display of sheer willpower, waved the stretcher away and walked out under his own power. The crowd erupted into absolute pandemonium. By risking his physical well-being, Foley had forced the audience to believe in him completely. He forged an unbreakable emotional bond with the paying customers that night. But the aftermath away from the blinding arena lights was a completely different story. According to his wife, the anxiety at home was unbearable. Foley usually called immediately after a major broadcast to assure his family he was safe. On this night, the phone remained silent for hours. When he finally managed to call, Colette Foley screamed at him, revealing that his young children truly believed their father had died on television. The absolute trust she had in his ability to protect himself was fundamentally shattered. When Foley finally walked to the backstage curtain, he was swarmed by concerned peers. One of the first people to confront him was the chairman, Vince McMahon. McMahon looked at the battered, bleeding performer, thanked him for his unparalleled sacrifice for the company, and sternly demanded that Foley promise never do anything like that ever again. As Dr. Petit painstakingly pulled dozens of metal thumbtacks out of Foley's flesh, Foley, still heavily concussed, turned to The Undertaker and genuinely asked if they had remembered to use the thumbtacks. He had absolutely no memory of the final moments of the match. The physical toll was catastrophic. Medical reports indicated 15 stitches required beneath his lip, 2 completely shattered teeth, a severely bruised kidney that caused extreme pain for 6 weeks, a dislocated jaw, and a dislocated shoulder. He had to be physically dressed and put into bed by his peers that night. Yet, despite the horrific injuries, the event sparked a monumental career renaissance. Within 6 months of that legendary night, the man Vince McMahon once deemed completely unmarketable was crowned the World Wrestling Federation champion. However, the psychological burden of being labeled a hardcore legend began to take a severe toll. Foley felt immense pressure to continuously top his previous stunts. He felt a deep, unwavering obligation to his opponents and the paying audience to deliver unseen levels of violence. Executives issued stern warnings, advising him that pushing the limits of physical human endurance would eventually catch up with him. Foley understood the warnings, but he fundamentally disagreed. Just 7 months later, Foley pushed the boundaries of safety once again in a famously brutal I Quit match against rising superstar The Rock. The parameters of the match dictated that there would be no referee stoppages for excessive blood loss. Backstage producers pleaded with Foley, warning him it was a terrible idea. But Foley was riding a massive tidal wave of popularity and refused to back down. The match devolved into an uncomfortable, sickening display of violence. Foley was handcuffed, rendering his arms completely useless to defend his head. The script originally called for Foley to take 5 unprotected strikes to the head with a solid steel chair. However, caught in the heat of the unscripted chaos, Foley ultimately absorbed 11 devastating chair shots to his unprotected skull. In the front row of the arena, his wife and young children watched in sheer horror. The children were not old enough to differentiate between theatrical performance and genuine physical assault. The tragic reality was that they were watching their father sustain legitimate brain damage for the sake of a television storyline. The footage remains incredibly difficult to watch today, sparking deep ethical debates regarding the responsibilities of promoters and performers alike. The long-term consequences of these extreme artistic choices are deeply sobering. According to medical professionals and the family's own accounts, Foley suffered countless unrecorded concussions throughout his career. He reached a point where he would drive his car around his own neighborhood and forget where he lived. When he finally attended a consultation with a corporate neurologist, the diagnosis was grim. The doctor explicitly warned Foley that he should never step inside a wrestling ring again, stating that continuing to wrestle would inevitably lead to him being permanently crippled. Today, the scientific community is highly aware of the terrifying realities of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a degenerative brain disease caused by repetitive trauma when a performer takes a heavy fall in the ring. The impact is frequently compared to sustaining a 25-mile-per-hour automobile accident, The Foley family lives in constant, lingering fear of what the future holds 10 or 20 years down the line. Foley himself admits to the profound worry surrounding his cognitive health. To fight the potential decline, he actively engages in spoken-word theatrical tours, utilizing performances as mental gymnastics to keep his brain sharp and engaged while still absorbing the intoxicating roar of the crowd. Looking back at the legacy of his career, Foley is a deeply complex individual. He is a multiple-time world champion, a celebrated author, and a dedicated philanthropist. Yet, for many years, he harbored a deep, simmering resentment toward the Hell in a cell match. He fell into a dark, psychological place, frustrated that despite his incredible verbal skills and storytelling ability, the general public only recognized him for being thrown off a 20-foot steel cage. It was a quiet conversation with his legendary rival, The Undertaker, that finally brought him peace. The Undertaker looked at his battered friend and profoundly stated that the violence they created that specific night would ultimately outlive them both. Foley finally embraced the grim reality of his legacy. He had sacrificed his body to create a moment of pure, unadulterated awe. Few human beings on the planet have the ability to leave millions of people breathless. Foley did exactly that. The ultimate testament to this journey occurred recently inside a dusty corporate warehouse. Foley and his daughter were touring the facility when they unexpectedly stumbled upon the original, rusted steel panels of the Hell in a cell structure. Foley approached the cold metal. He reached out and touched the steel. And for the first time in his daughter's life, she watched her father cry. The immense weight of his mortality, the realization of what he had survived, and the sheer terror of how easily it all could have ended, washed over him in a flood of profound emotion. According to Foley's own reflections, there is no financial reward large enough to justify the immense physical risks he took. While the medical community's understanding of severe head trauma was primitive during his active years, he admits that he cannot definitively say he would have changed his chaotic style even if he had possessed the modern medical knowledge. To Mick Foley, the wrestling ring was a blank canvas, and he was a twisted artist painting surreal, sublime, and violent performance art. Despite the heavy physical toll, he considers it a magical way to make a living, because on those specific, rare nights when the story clicked and the audience believed, it provided one of the most powerful, intoxicating feelings in the entire world. The legend of Hell in a Cell remains a complex, bloody tapestry. It is a story of incredible physical resilience, terrifying corporate negligence, and the lengths a human being will go to in order to feel truly loved by total strangers. It is professional wrestling at its absolute most dangerous, and it is a night the world will never, ever forget. When you analyze the history of professional wrestling, certain dates are permanently carved into the bedrock of the industry. These are the moments that shift the paradigm, forever altering our understanding of human endurance and the psychological toll of sports entertainment. June 28, 1998, is undeniably one of those dates. On that night, at the World Wrestling Federation's King of the Ring pay-per-view event, a single match earned its place as one of the most shocking, terrifying, and consequential spectacles in television history. It was The Undertaker colliding with mankind inside the demonic structure known as Hell in a Cell. To merely call a wrestling match is a profound understatement. Hell in a Cell hits the viewer like a mallet to the consciousness. For those of us who have spent decades analyzing the squared circle, we knew the concept was going to be chaotic, but absolutely no one anticipated the sheer magnitude of the danger. The company had two generational talents out there who actively desired to push the envelope until it violently fell over the edge. According to the accounts of those who witnessed it firsthand, the fundamental truth of that night was simple. Professional wrestling may incorporate elements of theatrical illusion, but gravity is an absolute reality. Throughout my years of covering this industry, I have been frightened by many things, but nothing terrified me or the global viewing audience. Quite like the unrelenting punishment that Mick Foley, the man behind a mankind mask, endured until you saw it unfold in real time. You simply could not believe that a human being could physically absorb this level of trauma and survive. The physical toll was not a scripted illusion. The pain was agonizingly real. The backstage drama was palpable. Colleagues, producers, and seasoned veterans were cursing, screaming, and questioning the very sanity of the man putting his life on the line. Why would a performer subject himself to this? That is the ultimate question at the heart of this investigative retrospective, one of wrestling's most infamous encounters. The legacy of Hell in a Cell persists today as a dual narrative, an epic, undeniable success in storytelling, and a chilling cautionary tale about the limits of the human body. Looking back, industry insiders acknowledge that multiple fatal bullets were dodged that evening. It remains highly controversial that a performer was permitted to lose consciousness and seamlessly continue a grueling athletic contest. The collateral damage that ensued in the years following is a sobering reality. It forces us to ask, when does the spectacle stop? When is the sacrifice enough? As the old industry adage goes, you pay all day long for the decisions you make during your 15 minutes in the spotlight. It was a dangerously crazy masterpiece, but every single fan, executive, and athlete needs to look in a mirror and ask if the permanent cost was truly worth it. To understand the match, we must first analyze the complex psychology of Mick Foley. Everyone who steps into the brutal world of professional wrestling is usually searching for something missing in their own personal lives. For Foley, his early years were marked by severe teasing, creating an overwhelming, deeply rooted psychological need for public acceptance and affection. He desperately wanted to be liked, and eventually, he wanted to hold the most prestigious prize in the industry, the World Wrestling Federation Championship. According to Foley's own recollections, the genesis of his extreme style can be traced back to his sophomore year in college. In a desperate bid for attention, he consumed a swig of red food coloring and executed a flying leap off a bed, crashing onto a stuffed animal resting on a solid concrete floor. Upon impact, he spat the red concoction out for dramatic effect. His peers in the dormitory were watching in sheer horror. When one young woman vocalized that it was the most disgusting thing she had ever witnessed, Foley experienced an intoxicating surge of power. A complex psychological mechanism clicked into place. If he could not force people to love him, perhaps he could compel them to be thoroughly disgusted by him. He simply needed to extract a visceral reaction. Thus, the foundation of the hardcore legend was poured. Today, Hell in a Cell is frequently cited as the perfect gateway for new viewers. Countless current fans point to that specific match as their initiation into the industry. However, a crucial follow-up question must be asked. Do they expect every performance to mirror that level of brutality? Because the stark reality is that they do not. A standard Mick Foley performance throughout his career was incredibly hardcore, characterized by brutal impacts, thumbtacks, barbed wire, and even fire. His tenure in Japan involved matches featuring composition for explosives and being speared through flaming tables. He consistently elected to take high-impact falls directly onto exposed concrete. According to his daughter, Noelle Foley, her father seemingly thrived on generating a reaction of absolute shock and horror from the audience. He willingly put his body through catastrophic trauma just to hear the crowd gasp. For Foley, realism was his most effective psychological tool. He operated under the dangerous philosophy that he was not delivering a quality performance unless he experienced severe difficulty walking back to his hotel room. It was not that he masochistically enjoyed the physical agony. Rather, he found immense satisfaction in his unique ability to absorb unimaginable punishment and portray it in a way that captivated millions. But behind the gruesome spectacle was a man deeply loved by his family. Colette Foley, his wife of over 35 years, provides a stark contrast to the monstrous characters he portrayed. When she first met Mick, she was captivated by his gentle eyes and his kind, compassionate nature. Despite his terrible humor and corny jokes, they forged an incredible partnership. Their wedding song was remarkably fitting, Beauty and the Beast. Colette deeply understood his unwavering commitment to his craft. She recognized that when the adrenaline was flowing, his singular focus was ensuring the audience left talking about the greatness of the show, even at his own catastrophic risk. That insatiable drive pushed him to escalate the danger at every turn. This drive birthed the persona of Cactus Jack, a wildly unpredictable and charismatic figure that convinced audiences he might genuinely be insane. Jim Cornette, an incredibly respected manager, agent, and producer, noted that Foley possessed an undeniable magnetism. He was entirely unorthodox. Cornette highlights Foley's masterful grasp of in-ring psychology. He recognized that audiences were magnetized by a performer who appeared completely out of control, actively defying the established script. Foley could grab the audience by the emotional throat, taking them on a terrifying ride and expertly eliciting the exact responses he desired. As his willingness to cross the line increased, so did his international reputation. His early career was built on immense sacrifice. Foley's living conditions consisted of a simple mattress on the floor and a faulty video cassette recorder connected to a black and white television. On that machine, he consumed up to 12 hours of Japanese wrestling content every single day. He was drawn to the hyper-realism and the physical storytelling, where a competitor had to conquer not just their opponent, but a perilous environment. Japan seemed like the ultimate destination for his unique skill set. The Japanese promoters were actively seeking a foreign talent who could convincingly rival the legendary Terry Funk. Funk, widely regarded as a master making audiences suspend their disbelief, became a crucial mentor to Foley. Together, they engaged in explosive, heavily bleeding, and fiery death matches across Japan. Foley was naturally drawn to the chaotic elements, often leaving the ring on his hands and knees, viewing his physical destruction as definitive proof that he had achieved something truly special. It was his unique method of standing out in a highly competitive industry. Because of this extreme approach, Foley never envisioned himself performing for the World Wrestling Federation. At that specific time, the company was operating under a strict general audience rating, presenting a highly sanitized corporate product. Foley's brand of visceral violence inherently clashed with the company's pristine image. Al Snow, a former superstar and Foley's closest travel companion, confirms that Chairman Vince McMahon actively did not want Mick Foley in his company. McMahon did not view Foley as a marketable asset and openly criticized his physical presentation. However, Jim Ross, acting as the vice president of talent relations at the time, recognized a hidden genius in the unlikeliest of packages. Ross relentlessly petitioned McMahon, asking for a leap of faith based on his seasoned talent evaluation. The company desperately needed compelling challengers for The Undertaker, one of the most protected and lucrative properties in wrestling history. McMahon's strategy of constantly feeding giant, lumbering athletes to The Undertaker had become incredibly stale and monotonous. Ross argued that what The Undertaker truly needed was an unpredictable lunatic. According to backstage lore, a frustrated McMahon finally slammed his hand on a table and conceded, agreeing to bring Foley in under one strict condition: they had completely covered his face. McMahon's initial perception was that Foley was nobody, a blank slate of nothingness. From this corporate mandate, the character of Mankind was meticulously constructed. Gerald Briscoe, a legendary producer and Hall of Famer, recalls the immense challenge of building a viable character around an athlete the owner completely dismissed. Yet the disturbing, self-mutilating persona of Mankind would not have succeeded with anyone other than Mick Foley. Without a genuine, profound connection to the viewing audience, any character is doomed to fail. Foley committed to the psychological darkness of Mankind with absolute perfection. He was willing to endure anything to ensure the character resonated. Ross's primary goal of making Foley the perfect foil for The Undertaker was achieved, but it came with a terrifying new responsibility. Ross now had to actively prevent Foley from accidentally ending his own life in the pursuit of entertainment. The initial rivalry between The Undertaker and Mankind established a legendary foundation, spanning 7 pay-per-view matches and 10 television main events across the globe. However, as time progressed, Foley astutely recognized that his character's momentum had plateaued. He felt an intense internal pressure to innovate, desperately needing to introduce an element that would immortalize their rivalry rather than dilute it. The opportunity presented itself at the 1998 King of the Ring event. Producers aimed to resurrect the historic feud by utilizing a newly constructed environment, Hell in a Cell. Traditionally, steel cage matches in a company required a competitor to escape by climbing over the top or walking through a designated door. The Hell in a Cell concept, pitched as an inescapable structure with a solid roof, guaranteed that 2 men would enter and only one would leave victorious. The inaugural Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, held 9 months prior, was universally acclaimed as a technical masterpiece and a historic milestone. Foley, studying that previous encounter, felt completely inadequate. He watched the athleticism of Michaels and openly admitted he could not replicate those physical feats. Faced with the daunting task of following Classic, Foley sought counsel from his mentor, Terry Funk. When asked for advice on how to elevate the match, Funk jokingly suggested that they should start the bout on the absolute top of the massive structure and that Foley should allow himself to be thrown off. It was intended as dark, sarcastic humor, but when the laughter subsided, Foley stared at Funk and coldly stated that he believed he could actually execute the fall. The concept became an obsession. Foley casually pitched the terrifying idea of being thrown off the structure to both The Undertaker and Vince McMahon. It required a masterful job of persuasion. The Undertaker was highly reluctant, deeply concerned about the sheer physics of launching a human being from that altitude. However, once Foley secured the blessing of company executives, the spot was officially sanctioned. Foley's motivation was deeply poignant. He did not view this event as a catalyst for a grand second act in his career. He merely viewed it as a desperate measure to keep his head above water, fully believing that once the specific storyline concluded, his career would quietly end. The Undertaker, trusting Foley's bizarre spatial awareness and absolute fearlessness, agreed to the choreography. The stage was set for an unprecedented catastrophe. Commentator Jerry Lawler noted the immense pressure Foley must have felt walking down the aisle, fully aware that he had to somehow surpass the previous Michaels and Undertaker Classic. As a competitor lacking traditional agility, Foley's only currency was his willingness to suffer. On that fateful evening inside the Pittsburgh Civic Arena, a sold-out crowd of 16,000 spectators waited in eager anticipation. Jimmy Corderas, serving as a referee and crew member, watched intensely from the backstage monitors alongside lead producer Gerald Briscoe. Decades later, industry veterans still marvel at the footage, noting that absolutely no one in the arena could have possibly comprehended what was about to transpire. As the match commenced, Foley, draped in the grotesque Mankind attire, made a decision that immediately shattered conventional logic. Instead of entering the locked door, he began scaling the exterior of the towering metal structure. The audience, the commentators, and the executives were thrust into a state of bewildered shock. The Undertaker's ominous entrance music echoed through the arena as Foley waited on the roof, internally terrified. He had boldly assured McMahon that he was comfortable with heights, but the harsh reality of standing nearly 20 feet above the concrete paralyzed him. He frantically calculated how he could gracefully climb back down without permanently ruining his professional reputation. But the die was cast. The Undertaker followed him up. The psychological terror of the match began the moment both men stood on the roof. The metal mesh was secured by simple plastic zip ties. The combined weight of the two athletes exceeded 600 pounds. With every step, the metal fencing bowed violently, sinking by nearly a foot. The terrifying sound of the plastic ties snapping and popping echoed through the microphones. The entire structure was actively disintegrating beneath their boots. Foley initially attempted to execute a suplex maneuver on the roof, but the Undertaker wisely aborted the sequence. Acutely aware that a high-impact move would send them both crashing to the compromised mesh to the ring below. As they cautiously navigated toward the edge of the cell, Directly above the Spanish announce table, a collective sense of dread washed over the arena. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler watched in mounting horror. The margin for error was microscopic. From that staggering height, the broadcast table looked like a fragile piece of dollhouse furniture. Then, time seemingly stood still. The Undertaker grabbed Mankind and violently hurled him from the top of the cage. A 300-pound man plummeted through the air, hurtling toward the commentators in what felt like horrifying slow motion. The impact was cataclysmic. The sickening crash of human bone and flesh obliterating the wooden table resonated throughout the arena. The immediate aftermath was pure, unadulterated panic. Backstage, producers and fellow wrestlers exploded in genuine concern. It visually mirrored a fatal automotive collision. A massive portion of the locker room legitimately believed they had just witnessed a man die on live television. The sheer velocity and abrupt halt of Foley's body defied all acceptable safety parameters. Families watching at home struggled to comprehend the violence. Colette Foley continuously reassured her terrified young children that the spectacle was fake, while internally battling a rising tide of sheer panic. The execution of the fall was a testament to Foley's bizarre genius. In midair, he manipulated his trajectory to ensure he landed perfectly flat across the desk, distributing the immense kinetic energy to avoid instant death. If the Undertaker had thrown him with slightly more or less force, Foley would have violently impacted the solid concrete floor, or worse, crushed the spectators in the front row. Spanish commentator Hugo Savanovic had narrowly escaped being flattened by diving out his chair at the last possible millisecond, as officials swarmed the wreckage. The unwritten rule of sports entertainment, maintaining the illusion, was completely abandoned. The situation demanded immediate, legitimate medical intervention. Terry Funk was the first to reach the shattered body, urgently asking if Foley was conscious. Dr. Francois Petit, the company's highly skilled ringside physician and chiropractor, sprinted from the medical area. The scene was utterly chaotic. Foley had suffered a brutal landing on his back and severely dislocated his shoulder. Emergency medical technicians rushed a stretcher to the ringside area, creating a highly complex logistical nightmare as they attempted to maneuver the gurney around the massive steel structure. As Foley was strapped onto the medical board and wheeled up the aisle, the broadcast team and the audience universally accepted that the traumatic event had reached its premature, albeit entirely justified, conclusion. But then, an incredibly dangerous psychological switch flipped within Mick Foley. As he was being wheeled away, he recognized that the longer he remained on television, the more deeply the audience became invested. Defying all medical advice and basic human preservation instincts, Foley demanded to be released from the stretcher. A chorus of officials, referees, and executives desperately pleaded with him to stop, screaming for him to go to the hospital. Instead, bearing a dislocated shoulder and a battered spine, Foley turned around and began the agonizing climb back up the cell. Backstage, seasoned veterans were utterly bewildered. They questioned his sanity, labeling it the most dangerous and irrational decision in the history of the business. Yet, simultaneously, they recognized that in that exact moment, Foley was transforming from a hard-working talent into an immortal star. The backstage area was packed with personnel, watching the monitors in stunned silence. The match had to continue, leading to the second major choreographed sequence. Foley and The Undertaker had previously agreed upon a chokeslam maneuver on the roof, specifically designed to cause a section of the fencing to gradually give way, creating a dramatic visual of Foley being stuffed through the ceiling and hanging safely above the ring. However, the weakened zip ties failed catastrophically. As The Undertaker drove Foley downward, the entire metal panel detached completely. There was no gradual descent. Foley plummeted straight down, completely untethered, crashing with devastating force directly onto the unforgiving wrestling mat. This was not a planned spectacle. It was a terrifying, unscripted disaster. The viewing audience, the commentators, and the producers were plunged into a state of legitimate horror. The ring mat is not a soft cushion. It is heavy canvas stretched over thick wooden planks and steel beams. offering the unforgiving resistance of a concrete sidewalk, compounding the tragedy. A heavy steel folding chair that had been resting on the roof fell directly alongside Foley, violently striking him directly in the face upon impact. The locker room thought he was dead. Colette Foley thought she was watching her husband perish. Jim Cornette was furious, initially believing Foley had deceived the production team by concealing a secret suicidal stunt. This impact marked the very first time in Foley's extensive career that he was legitimately knocked completely unconscious. Medical personnel and officials flooded the cage once again. The Undertaker, visibly shaken, broke character and instructed Terry Funk to verify if Foley was still breathing. Foley lay entirely unresponsive for 42 agonizing seconds. It was a situation that unequivocally demanded an immediate medical stoppage. However, the culture of the industry at that time dictated that the show must go on. The performers did not stop matches. They bought time. Demonstrating incredible veteran instincts, Terry Funk initiated an unscripted physical altercation with The Undertaker, absorbing punishment to divert the camera's focus and allow the medical team vital seconds to assess Foley's catastrophic condition. When Foley finally regained consciousness, his first visual anchor was Terry Funk's shoes. Operating on pure, irrational instinct, he realized he was still a match and inexplicably willed himself back to his feet. The visual presentation of Mankind at that moment was grotesque. He was bleeding profusely from a massive laceration underneath his lower lip, demonstrating a bizarre dedication to the theatricality of the moment. Foley intentionally pushed his tongue through the gaping facial wound, creating one of the most haunting and iconic images in television history. He smiled through the blood, revealing a chilling detail. The impact of the steel chair had violently knocked a tooth completely out of his jaw, forcing it up into his nasal passage, where it remained visibly lodged in his nostril. The atmosphere in the arena transcended sports entertainment. The concern etched on the faces of every official and spectator was profoundly real. Foley's eyes were vacant. The lights were on, but nobody was home. Yet, operating purely on autopilot, Foley insisted on executing the final, agonizing sequence of the match, the thumbtack spot, driven by an inexplicable desire to ensure the fans received their money's worth. Foley had bags of metal thumbtacks spread across the mat. In a state of heavy concussion and severe trauma, he purposefully absorbed multiple impacts directly into the sea of sharp metal, ensuring his body was completely covered in thousands of tacks. The adrenaline had completely overridden his central nervous system. He had pushed himself past the threshold of pain, becoming an active participant in his own torture. Finally, after 17 excruciating minutes, The Undertaker secured the victory. The match was mercifully concluded, as Foley was assisted to the back, refusing the stretcher a second time. The 16,000 fans in attendance erupted in a standing ovation. They recognized the horrific reality of the performance. By sacrificing his own well-being, Foley had forced the audience to completely invest their belief in him. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, paid for with human suffering. The aftermath of the event was fraught with intense emotion and severe medical consequences. Backstage, Colette Foley waited in agonizing silence for a phone call that was uncharacteristically delayed. When Mick finally called hours later, her profound worry had mutated into fierce anger. She furiously reminded him that his children genuinely believed they had watched their father die. The trust she had placed in his ability to protect himself was severely damaged. As Foley stumbled to the curtain, his body still covered in embedded thumbtacks, he was immediately intercepted by Vince McMahon. The chairman expressed deep gratitude for Foley's unprecedented sacrifice for the company, but immediately issued a stern, non-negotiable directive. Foley was never to attempt anything of that magnitude ever again. The medical report was staggering. Foley suffered 15 stitches beneath his lip, the loss of 2 teeth, a severely bruised kidney that plagued him for 6 weeks, and a dislocated jaw alongside the shoulder injury. The exact details of his concussion treatment remain unclear. a chilling reminder of the era's inadequate medical protocols. Yet, paradoxically, the physical destruction catalyzed a magnificent career renaissance, going from an unmarketable outcast. Foley leveraged the momentum of Hell in a Cell to capture the World Wrestling Federation Championship just 6 months later. However, the psychological trap had been set. The bar for violence had been raised to an insurmountable height, and Foley felt an intense, crushing obligation to constantly over-deliver to maintain his status as a hardcore legend. This dangerous trajectory culminated just 7 months later in a brutal I Quit match against The Rock. Ignoring the warnings of producers who feared for his safety, Foley choreographed a highly controversial sequence involving extreme, unprotected strikes to the cranium. He instructed The Rock to hit him with full force. The original plan called for 5 impacts with a steel chair. In the chaotic heat of the live broadcast, Foley absorbed a staggering 11 unprotected shots to the head, all while his hands were firmly handcuffed behind his back. The footage remains deeply sickening to watch. It stands as a dark stain on the industry. Foley suffered legitimate brain damage for the sake of a television storyline. His daughter, Noelle, vividly details the severe psychological trauma inflicted on their family. She admits to having absolutely no singular memory of her father ever wrestling. An aggressive psychological block created to protect her from the sheer horror of watching her father being brutalized. The long-term consequences of Foley's sacrificial philosophy are deeply concerning. Medical professionals universally warn him about the catastrophic risks of his chosen style. Following a highly discouraging evaluation by the company's neurologist, Foley sought an independent medical opinion. The verdict was absolute. The physician explicitly instructed Foley that he should never step foot inside a wrestling ring again. Today, the specter of chronic traumatic encephalopathy casts a long, dark shadow over Mick Foley's legacy. The cumulative effect of repetitive concussions, each impact comparable to a 25-mile-per-hour automotive collision, creates an uncertain and terrifying future. His family lives with the daily anxiety of not knowing how his cognitive functions will degrade in the next 10 or 20 years. Foley openly acknowledges these fears, noting that he actively combats cognitive decline by engaging in spoken word tours, utilizing the live performances as vital mental gymnastics to keep his mind sharp. Despite the physical limitations and the looming neurological threats, Foley fiercely protects his legacy. For many years, he harbored a deep, dark resentment toward Hell in a Cell. Frustrated, an entire career of intricate storytelling was eclipsed by a single night of extreme violence. However, a profound conversation with The Undertaker shifted his perspective. The Undertaker pointedly reminded him that what they created that night would outlive them both. This acceptance was beautifully captured during a visit to the World Wrestling Entertainment Archival Warehouse. Upon unexpectedly discovering the original rusted panels of the cell, Foley gently touched the steel mesh and began to weep. It was a rare display of vulnerability for a man who had built a career on invincibility. The tears spoke volumes about the gravity of the event, the sheer terror he secretly harbored, and the profound realization of his own mortality. As we conclude this retrospective, we are forced to confront a highly complex legacy. Mick Foley viewed the professional wrestling ring as a canvas for surreal, sublime performance art. He subjected his physique to unimaginable horrors, simply to hear the deafening roar of strangers, desperately seeking the authentic love and acceptance he craved since his youth. He acknowledges that there is no financial or professional reward substantial enough to truly justify the catastrophic risks he took, especially given modern medical insights into brain trauma. Yet he survived. He crafted moments of unparalleled emotional power that will echo through the annals of television, history long after the physical wounds have scarred over. Mick Foley paid an agonizing, permanent price for his 15 minutes in the spotlight. Whether that sacrifice was fundamentally heroic or tragically misguided remains a question that every observer must answer for themselves. What is undeniably certain, however, is that on a warm June night in 1998, A man walked into a steel cage as a mortal and was violently thrown into immortality. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a deep exploration into one of the most defining and harrowing chapters in the history of professional wrestling. We are peeling back the curtain to examine a night that permanently altered the landscape of sports entertainment. On June 28, 1998, at the World Wrestling Federation King of the Ring pay-per-view, the world bore witness to a spectacle that would etch itself into the darkest and most awe-inspiring corners of our collective memory. It was a Hell in a Cell match, The Undertaker against Mankind. To simply call a match would be a profound understatement. Hell in a Cell hits the viewer like a mallet to the consciousness. Going into the broadcast, industry insiders knew it was going to be chaotic, but nobody could have predicted the sheer magnitude of the madness that would unfold. You had two phenomenal talents out there who thrived on pushing the absolute limits. Two men who liked to push the envelope until it teetered and fell entirely over the edge. People often say that professional wrestling is a performance, a scripted exhibition. But let me tell you, you cannot fake gravity. In my decades of covering this industry, I have been frightened by a lot of things inside the squared circle. Yet, nothing frightened me quite as much as the events of that evening, at least until the later stages of that very same match. What left fans completely stunned, and what continues to leave historians of the sport speechless, was the unrelenting punishment that Mick Foley endured until you saw it with your own two eyes. You simply did not believe that a human being could physically subject themselves to such trauma and live to tell the tale. This match was unequivocally real. The pain radiating through the arena was real. The drama unfolding before 16,000 fans in the Pittsburgh Civic Arena was visceral. Backstage, agents and colleagues were cursing and screaming, calling him an absolute idiot out of pure terror and concern. People were asking the empty air, "Why are you doing this?" Today, this event stands as one of wrestling's most infamous encounters. The legacy of this Hell in a Cell match persists as both an epic commercial success and a grim cautionary tale for future generations. Looking back, observers agree that the industry dodged multiple bullets that day. It is truly staggering to consider the reality of the situation. The fact that an organization would allow an athlete to be rendered entirely unconscious, only to wake up and continue the contest. The collateral damage that ensued from these decisions is an entirely different story. One that begs the ultimate questions. When does it stop? When is it finally enough? In this business, you pay all day long for the decisions you make during your 15 minutes in the spotlight. It was a dangerously crazy masterpiece, a canvas of surreal performance art. But everyone who watched it and everyone who participated in it needs to look in the mirror and ask themselves, was it truly worth the cost? To understand the sheer lunacy of June 28th, 1998, you have to understand the psychology of the man behind the leather mask. Everyone who gets into the professional wrestling business is searching for something, usually something they find missing in their own personal lives. Mick Foley was no exception. According to his own reflections, he was teased mercilessly during his youth. This constant belittlement bred an overwhelming, insatiable need to be liked, and an unrelenting drive to eventually capture the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Foley's desperate need for a reaction started long before he ever laced up a pair of boots. A story from his college days perfectly encapsulates his mindset. As a college sophomore, Foley took a massive swig of red food coloring. He then climbed onto a bed and executed a spectacular leap onto a stuffed dummy position on the unforgiving concrete floor of his dormitory. When he hit the floor, he dramatically spat the red concoction from his mouth. The entire dormitory was gathered around, watching this absurd display. In the silence that followed, he heard a female student yell out that it was the most disgusting thing she had ever seen. In that exact moment, Mick Foley did not feel embarrassment. He felt absolute power. His philosophy crystallized right then and there. If he could not make people love him, perhaps he could make them disgusted by him. He just needed to get a reaction. This deeply ingrained desire birthed the hardcore legend. Foley survived Hell in a Cell. But that match was merely the zenith of a career built on self-sacrifice. Hell in a Cell often serves as a gateway for new fans. Many people point to that specific bout as their introduction to the sport. However, the follow-up question must always be asked. Do they expect every match to look like that? Because the reality is they do not. A standard Mick Foley match, even on a quiet night, was extraordinarily brutal. It featured blood, thumbtacks, barbed wire, and fire. He was a man who allowed himself to be exploded by simulated explosives in Japanese death matches. He took spears through flaming tables and absorbed catastrophic falls directly onto exposed concrete. He voluntarily put his body through unimaginable torment just to elicit a visceral response from the crowd. His daughter, Noelle Foley, has noted that her father genuinely loved hearing the collective gasp of the audience, the loud, disgusted, or shocked reactions that echoed through the arenas. For Foley, realism was his greatest tool. He possessed a mindset where he believed he was not having a successful match unless he literally had trouble walking back to his hotel room later that night. It was not that he inherently enjoyed feeling physical pain. Rather, he enjoyed the fact that he possessed a unique fortitude to absorb it and portray it in a way that captivated millions. But what about the toll on those closest to him? Colette Foley, who has known Mick for over 35 years, saw a different side of the maniacal brawler. When she first met him, she did not see a hardcore legend. She noticed his gentle eyes. She recognized a kind, sweet human being. It was his incredibly corny jokes and terrible sense of humor that ultimately won her heart. Their deep connection was evident in the fact that their wedding song was a theme from Beauty and the Beast. They formed a phenomenal team. Colette understood his unparalleled commitment to his craft. She knew that once his adrenaline started pumping, his sole objective was to ensure the fans left the building talking about how spectacular the show was, regardless of the physical cost to himself. This insatiable drive propelled him to continually escalate the danger. Before he was Mankind, he developed a chaotic persona known as Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack was designed to be a wild, uncontrollable force. Fans legitimately questioned his sanity. He possessed a strange magnetic charisma. You simply could not take your eyes off the man. He was entirely unusual. Jim Cornette, who was working as an agent and producer for the World Wrestling Federation at the time of the Hell in a Cell match, frequently praised Foley's brilliant in-ring psychology. Foley inherently understood that the audience gravitated toward characters who appeared completely out of control, characters who seemed to actively rebel against the established script. He had a rare gift for taking the audience on a chaotic ride, manipulating their emotions to elicit the exact response he desired. As he pushed the boundaries, the spotlight shifted squarely onto him, and his reputation grew to mythical proportions. The foundation of this reputation was laid not in American arenas, but on a mattress on a floor in a modest bedroom. Foley and his wife lived humbly in the early days. Their bedroom featured a simple black and white television set connected to a videocassette recorder that barely functioned. Inside that machine were countless tapes of Japanese professional wrestling. Foley would sometimes study these tapes for 12 hours a day. He was captivated by the realism and the gritty storytelling. In those Japanese death matches, it was not merely about man versus man. It was about man versus his environment. Foley initially believed that Japan would be the primary stage for his career. The Japanese promoters were actively looking for a foreign talent capable of feuding with the legendary Terry Funk. Terry Funk is widely considered one of the absolute greatest of all time, largely due to his unparalleled ability to make an audience suspend their disbelief within a single second. Funk evolved into a mentor for Foley. Together, they engaged in a series of explosive, violent, and fiery death matches across Japan. Foley was always naturally drawn to the wild, untamed aspects of the sport. He would routinely find himself on his hands and knees in the ring, viewing the agony as undeniable proof that he had achieved something truly special. He recognized that this extreme style was the one avenue where he could make himself stand out. Because of this brutal aesthetic, Foley never envisioned himself working for Vince McMahon. During that era, the World Wrestling Federation was far from the gritty, edgy product it would later become. It was essentially a family-friendly, highly sanitized environment. It was incredibly bland. For a gritty brawler like Foley, his style aggressively clashed with the polished corporate image the company was selling. Furthermore, Vince McMahon outright rejected the idea of hiring Foley. According to industry veterans, McMahon did not believe Foley was marketable. He did not think Foley had the physical attractiveness required for television. It took the relentless advocacy of Jim Ross, who was serving as a vice president of talent relations, to change McMahon's mind. Ross pleaded with McMahon to trust his eye for talent, insisting that there was something profoundly special about the young man. The World Wrestling Federation desperately needed credible opponents for their top attractions, specifically The Undertaker. The Undertaker was arguably the most significant star in the history of the promotion. McMahon had continuously tried booking massive, lumbering giants to face The Undertaker, but the resulting matches were slow, boring, and utterly dull. What the storyline actually required was an absolute lunatic. Legend has it that McMahon finally slammed his hand onto a table and agreed to bring Foley in, but with one massive caveat: they had to completely cover his face. McMahon demanded that the character have no known identity and no recognizable past, viewing Foley himself as a nobody. The creative team was tasked with building a captivating persona out of absolutely nothing. From this creative void emerged the character of Mankind. According to Hall of Famer Gerald Briscoe, this bizarre concept would have failed miserably with any other performer. Yet, Foley possessed an innate ability to connect with the audience. He understood that without a deep, emotional connection, a character is entirely meaningless. Foley fully committed to the role of Mankind, and fans can always sense genuine commitment. Jim Ross's primary goal was for Foley to serve as the perfect foil for The Undertaker. Foley proved willing to try absolutely anything to make the rivalry succeed. As the old saying goes, he would not turn down anything but the bed covers. This fearless attitude presented a massive challenge for management. They had to find a way to stop him from accidentally killing himself in the ring. The Undertaker and Mankind laid an incredible foundation. They wrestled in 7 pay-per-view events and 10 television broadcasts, traveling across the entire globe together. However, as time progressed, the Mankind character began to plateau. Foley recognized the stagnation and knew he needed to do something drastic, something that would permanently enhance their shared legacy rather than detract from it. This brings us to the summer of 1998 for the King of the Ring event. Producers planned to resurrect the Mankind and Undertaker rivalry using a relatively new match concept: Hell in a Cell. Traditionally, steel cage matches in the promotion required a competitor to win by either climbing over the top of the fencing or escaping to the door. The concept of Hell in a Cell, originally pitched by personnel who wanted to escalate the violence, was different. It placed a solid roof on top of the structure. The psychological hook was simple: 2 men go in and only 1 man comes out. The very first Hell in a Cell match had taken place 9 months prior between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. It was a masterpiece of storytelling and remains, in the eyes of many purists, the greatest technical execution of the gimmick. Foley watched that original match with his jaw resting on the floor. He realized immediately that he lacked the athletic agility to replicate the breathtaking maneuvers executed by Michaels and The Undertaker. Yet, he was scheduled to step into that exact same structure with The Undertaker. Searching for inspiration, Foley consulted his mentor, Terry Funk. He asked Funk what they could possibly do to top the previous Cell match. Funk, with his trademark dark humor, started laughing and jokingly suggested that they should start the match on the actual roof of Cell, and that Foley should be thrown off. Funk intended it as an absurd joke, but as Funk stopped laughing, Foley looked him dead in the eye and stated that he believed he could actually survive that fall. Once the seed was planted, Foley could not get the terrifying idea out of his head. He strategically pitched the concept of being thrown off the Cell to The Undertaker and Vince McMahon during a casual conversation, delivering what can only be described as a masterful sales pitch. The Undertaker was highly reluctant. deeply uncomfortable with the prospect of hurling a human being off a towering steel structure. But Foley remained dead set on the stunt, eventually securing the necessary approvals. Foley was not viewing this match as a launch pad for a grand second act in his career. He was simply desperate to keep his head above water, fully believing that once his current run concluded, his career would be permanently finished. The Undertaker, knowing the layout, trusted Foley's vision. If Foley could see the stunt in his mind, he believed he could execute it safely. As the fateful evening arrived, the tension in the Pittsburgh Civic Arena was thick enough to cut with a knife. The audience was fully aware that the loser of this contest might bypass the local hospital entirely and head straight to the morgue. As Foley walked down the aisle, the psychological pressure must have been suffocating. He was following in the footsteps of Shawn Michaels, armed only with a dangerously unathletic physique and a suicidal plan. Backstage, personnel were glued to the monitors. Referee Jimmy Corderas, who was working the ring crew that night, sat beside Gerald Briscoe, operating essentially as the pilot of the broadcast production. Nobody in the locker room and nobody in the stands knew exactly what to anticipate. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler, calling the action at ringside, were kept completely in the dark, experiencing the shock simultaneously with the fans at home. Foley's objective was to start the match in a manner that had never been attempted in the history of the sport. As he bypassed a locked door and began scaling the outside of the cage, a wave of confusion washed over the crowd. People wondered if he was experiencing a psychological breakdown, questioning his logic and suggesting he required therapy. The truth, hidden behind the leather mask, was that Foley had never actually been on top of the cell during rehearsals. He had lied to McMahon and The Undertaker, assuring them he had tested it. In reality, as he reached the summit, he was absolutely terrified. He famously struggled with a fear of heights. As The Undertaker's ominous music echoed through the arena, Foley paced a dark, precarious roof, internally panicking about how he could gracefully climb back down without ruining his professional reputation. But the die was cast. The Undertaker scaled the structure to meet him, and the match officially commenced high above the ring. The visual alone created an inescapable sense of dread. The roof of the cell was secured using basic plastic zip ties. Suddenly, the structure was forced to support over 600 pounds of moving mass. With every step the two massive men took, the chain-link mesh sagged dramatically, dropping by roughly a foot. The horrifying sound of zip ties snapping and springing off the metal frame echoed through the building. The combatants were literally destroying the structure just by walking on it. Foley initially attempted to execute a suplex on the roof, but the Undertaker swiftly blocked the maneuver, astutely realizing that the impact would likely send them both plummeting through the weakened ceiling. The brawl migrated dangerously close to the edge of the cell, directly above the broadcast positions. From the roof, the heavy wooden announce tables looked like fragile dollhouse furniture. The margin for error was practically non-existent. Then the unthinkable happened. The Undertaker grabbed Mankind, hoisted him into the air, and flung a 300-pound human being from a height of nearly 20 feet. The descent seemed to happen in agonizing slow motion, yet it was over in the blink of an eye. The impact was cataclysmic. A deafening crash echoed through the arena as Foley completely obliterated the Spanish announce table. Hugo Savinovic, the Spanish commentator, had barely managed to dive out of his chair before the destruction occurred. The immediate reaction was absolute, paralyzing horror. Jim Ross screamed into his microphone, deeply fearing that they had just broadcast a live fatality. Backstage, the locker room erupted in genuine panic. Witnessing the fall was akin to watching a horrific automobile accident. Those watching fully believed Foley had been killed on impact. It was a stunt so recklessly dangerous that no one in the long, bizarre history of the wrestling business had ever dared attempt it. Colette Foley, watching at home with her two young children, was paralyzed with fear. She desperately tried to soothe her kids by repeating that the violence was fake, but internally she was terrified. The danger was entirely believable. If The Undertaker had thrown him just a fraction of an inch too far, or too short, Foley would have bypassed the table and landed directly on the unforgiving concrete floor, or worse, directly into the front row of the audience. Miraculously, Foley had visualized the fall perfectly. In midair, he managed to rotate his body just enough to land flat on the desk, utilizing the collapsing monitors and wood to cushion his fall and save his life, while the production truck scrambled into business mode, eagerly queuing up replays of the incredible visual. The reality at ringside was grim. The fans stood in shocked silence, looking down at a broken man laying in the wreckage. Terry Funk was the first to sprint out from the back, desperately checking to see if his friend was even conscious. The medical team mobilized immediately. Dr. Francois Petit, the resident physician known for his unorthodox but highly effective methods, rushed to the scene. The situation was chaotic. Foley had landed horribly on his back and had severely dislocated his shoulder. The emergency medical technicians struggled to navigate their gurney to the wreckage, ultimately forcing the crew to mechanically raise the massive steel cell, with the Undertaker still standing ominously on the roof, just to extract the wounded performer. Foley was strapped to the gurney. The match appeared to be unequivocally over, but as he was being wheeled up the aisle, the fog in his mind began to clear. He realized that the longer he remained on camera, the more deeply the audience became emotionally invested, driven by his pathological need to deliver a legendary performance. Foley defied the desperate pleas of the medical staff, the officials, and his colleagues. He shocked the world by rolling off the gurney and marching back toward the ring. Backstage personnel watched in absolute disbelief, questioning his sanity and assuming he was the most foolish individual to ever lace up a pair of boots. Foley himself later admitted he had absolutely no idea how he was going to survive the rest of the bout, but he had made a solemn pledge to finish the story, and he was determined to see it through. The crowd erupted as he began to climb the cell once again. This specific moment of sheer, irrational defiance is what truly transformed Mick Foley from a popular wrestler into an immortal star. The Undertaker met him back on the roof. The next phase of the match was supposed to be far less dangerous. The plan called for the Undertaker to deliver a chokeslam, a standard wrestling maneuver, which would theoretically cause the already damaged mesh to sag further, creating a dramatic visual of mankind being stuffed downward into the cage. However, the weakened structure completely surrendered. The mesh tore open, and Foley plummeted straight through the roof. Unlike the first fall, there was no table to break his descent. He fell roughly 15 feet, crashing directly onto the solid ring canvas. The ring mat is frequently misunderstood by the public. Underneath a thin layer of padding lies highly unyielding wood and steel. The impact is essentially equivalent to falling onto solid cement. To compound the horror, a heavy, solid steel folding chair that had been resting on the roof fell directly through the hole behind him. As Foley violently struck the mat, the metal chair landed squarely on his face. This second fall was entirely unscripted and completely disastrous, while the first fall was a controlled stunt. The second fall was a catastrophic failure of the equipment. The reaction from the commentary desk and the backstage area shifted from shock to genuine devastation. Those watching cursed at the monitors, desperately trying to contact executives to stop the broadcast. It was impossible to explain to Foley's children that their father was merely acting when he was lying motionless, practically lifeless, on the canvas. The impact of the fall and the subsequent strike from the steel chair legitimately knocked Foley unconscious for 42 seconds. It was the first time in his exceptionally violent career that he had been completely knocked out cold. The cage was immediately flooded by personnel, including Dr. Francois and Terry Funk. They genuinely feared they were witnessing the end of Foley's life. The Undertaker, looking down to the torn roof, saw that Foley's eyes were glassy and completely unresponsive. Even the dead man was legitimately terrified of the consequences. He instructed Terry Funk to check if Foley was still breathing. Realizing the broadcast was lingering on a potentially tragic scene, Terry Funk, showcasing his masterful understanding of the industry, initiated an impromptu physical altercation with The Undertaker by intentionally getting himself chokeslammed. Funk successfully diverted the cameras and the crowd's attention away from the medical emergency, buying the doctor's precious time to tend to Foley. By all objective medical standards, the match should have been terminated immediately. However, the protocol in that era of professional wrestling rarely involved stopping a contest. Officials merely bought time for performers to recover. Foley desperately needed every single second. When he finally regained consciousness, the first thing he registered was the sight of Terry Funk's shoes. This grounded him, reminding him of his location and his purpose. Miraculously, he found the strength to stand. The visual of Mankind rising to his feet was horrifying. His face was a mangled mess. He had sustained a massive puncture wound entirely through his lower lip. Ever the showman, even through the haze of severe brain injury, Foley's immediate instinct was to create a memorable television visual. He deliberately stuck his tongue to the gaping hole in his lip and smiled a grotesque, blood-soaked smile for the cameras. Furthermore, the impact of the steel chair had knocked two of his teeth entirely out of his jaw. Bizarrely, one of those teeth became lodged inside his nostril. Medical professionals later theorized that the tooth had initially been knocked into the back of his throat, but because Foley was gasping so heavily for air, he inadvertently inhaled the tooth, forcing it up into his nasal passage. The match somehow continued. Foley's eyes were vacant. Nobody was home behind the mask. Yet his body continued to operate on pure muscle memory and adrenaline, demonstrating his relentless commitment to his craft. Foley then requested that they introduce thumbtacks into the match. Thousands of sharp metal tacks were scattered across the canvas. Foley purposely allowed himself to be thrown into the tacks, ensuring his body was covered in them to maximize the visual impact. When the adrenaline takes over a performer of his caliber, the pain ceases to register as a deterrent. They simply become a vessel for the violence, pushing past human limits without conscious thought. Finally, after 17 agonizing minutes, The Undertaker pinned Mankind, bringing the most spectacular and terrifying match in history to a merciful conclusion. The 16,000 fans inside the arena were completely drained, having witnessed a spectacle of endurance that permanently redefined the boundaries of the sport. Foley was offered a stretcher to leave the ringside area, but he adamantly waved it off, opting to walk out on his own 2 feet. This final act of defiance sent the crowd into an absolute frenzy. The audience recognized the profound reality of what they had just witnessed. They knew Foley had risked his actual life to entertain them, cementing a bond of unquestioning loyalty between the hardcore legend and his fans. He understood that by sacrificing his well-being, he allowed the audience to thoroughly and genuinely believe in the illusion of professional wrestling. However, the consequences of this sacrifice were severe. Back at home, Colette Foley was furious and terrified. Foley had established a routine of calling her immediately after dangerous matches to assure her he was safe. On the night she needed that phone call the most, there was only silence. When he finally contacted her hours later, she screamed through the receiver, informing him that his children believed he had died on live television. From that night forward, her ability to trust that he would protect his family over his performance was permanently fractured. Backstage, Foley was greeted as a conquering hero. Though most were simply relieved he was breathing, Vince McMahon approached him, expressing deep gratitude for what Foley had sacrificed to the company, but sternly ordered him to promise never to do anything like that ever again. As McMahon spoke, doctors were physically plucking dozens of thumbtacks from Foley's flesh. In a testament to his severe concussion, Foley turned to The Undertaker and genuinely asked if they had remembered to use the thumbtacks, entirely unaware that he was currently covered in them. The physical toll was staggering. Foley required 15 stitches to close the wound beneath his lip. He lost 2 teeth, suffered a dislocated jaw, and dislocated his shoulder. He sustained a badly bruised kidney that plagued him for 6 weeks. And, most significantly, he suffered an undiagnosed and untreated severe concussion. Yet, Professionally, the match was an unprecedented triumph. It sparked a massive career renaissance. Within 6 months, Mick Foley transitioned from a man Vince McMahon refused to put on television without a mask to the undisputed World Wrestling Federation champion. The roar of the crowd, the massive pops, and the intoxicating rush of adrenaline validated his darkest impulses. Tragically, the success established an impossible standard. The bar for violence had been raised to an astronomical height, and Foley felt a crushing obligation to continually live up to his moniker as a hardcore legend. He began taking risks that experts warned him against. Jim Ross explicitly warned him that continuing this reckless style would inevitably catch up to him. Foley understood the warning, but he fundamentally disagreed with the necessity of slowing down. Just 7 months later, Foley pushed the boundaries of human endurance once again, this time against The Rock in the infamous I Quit match. The narrative of the match dictated that neither man would stop fighting until the other surrendered over a microphone, meaning the match would not be stopped for excessive blood loss or injury. The bout was exceptionally brutal from the opening bell. The climax involved The Rock handcuffing Foley's hands behind his back and attacking him with a steel folding chair. Before the match, Foley had instructed The Rock to hit him with everything he had, prioritizing the visual brutality over his own safety. The initial plan called for Foley to absorb 5 unprotected chair shots to the head. Instead, caught in the heat of the moment and the frenzy of a narrative, Foley absorbed 11 catastrophic blows to his skull. The footage remains deeply disturbing. Foley's family sat in the front row, forced to watch the horrific beating. His young children were not old enough to differentiate between the scripted narrative and the very real physical trauma their father was enduring. It was a day of unimaginable trauma for Colette and the kids. Foley legitimately suffered severe brain damage for the sake of a television storyline. Looking back, Noelle Foley admits she has no singular memory of her father ever wrestling, likely because her mind blocked out the profound trauma of witnessing events like the I Quit match. Medical professionals acknowledge that 11 unprotected strikes to the head with a steel object could easily have killed an ordinary person. The event forces observers to question the ethics of the industry. Where exactly is the line drawn? Foley himself admits that he intentionally chose to absorb maximum punishment, often refusing to protect himself during maneuvers because the unprotected impact simply looked better on camera. Despite a chorus of medical professionals warning him that continuing his career would leave him permanently crippled, Foley stubbornly refused to stop. He was convinced he always had one great match left in him, actively trying to delay his inevitable physical decline. He continued to compete even when he was clearly exhibiting signs of severe neurological damage, casually admitting to instances where he would drive around his neighborhood with absolutely no memory of where he lived. He suffered concussion after concussion after concussion. Eventually, a neurological evaluation ordered by the company yielded grim results. Seeking a second opinion, Foley visited an independent neurologist. The doctor delivered a sobering verdict. While Foley could always shop around for a doctor willing to clear him, the unvarnished medical truth was that he should never step inside a wrestling ring again. Today, the bill for a lifetime of extreme violence has come due. Those who push the physical limits as aggressively as Mick Foley did inevitably pay a terrible price. Experts agree it is a miracle he is still alive. The shadow of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a degenerated brain, disease caused by repetitive trauma, looms large over his future.